Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today's episode, I am going to be joined by Aaron Hodes. He is an enterprise account executive at ShipBob, and he's also very involved in the e-commerce shipping space. So we're going to tap into Aaron's knowledge and his insights from the market and get a little bit from him on kind of what's happening in the e-commerce space right now. What are some of the biggest challenges that brands are facing out there? And I noticed too on LinkedIn, he talks a lot about inventory too, which is a passion of mine as well. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about that and see where his thoughts are there. So Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.
Definitely happy to have you on. Like I said, I've been seeing you on LinkedIn for a while, so I think I'm very happy and excited here to finally connect with you and be able to get you on the show and kind of tap into some of your insights. So you do work for ShipBob, right? So we haven't had anybody from ShipBob on the show before. So before we kind of dive into some insights and stuff here, maybe you could just kind of give us an overview of ShipBob for maybe people out there that are wondering or have heard the name or not so familiar with ShipBob.
Yeah, absolutely. So ShipBob is a tech-enabled third-party logistics provider. Mm-hmm. We specifically cater to the SMB and mid-market e-commerce brands that are out there. ShipBob's been really fortunate. We've raised about $300 million over the last decade or so, with the hope to kind of democratize the e-commerce fulfillment space. So we built a proprietary tech stack. That's everything from an OMS, warehouse management system, transportation management system. And that's what powers our network of warehouses that is across the globe now. So we have about 40 different warehouses across the globe. And I've been with the team for 5 years, primarily in a sales role. So, everything from a business development rep, and now I'm working with, some of our largest brands. So it's been a wild ride at ShipBob, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
All right, great. And so definitely, in your role, you're interacting with brands, I'm sure, probably on a daily basis, right? So I mean, you're certainly, seeing not only what are problems that brands are having in the space, but then also solutions as well, because I'm sure they're coming to you for some type of solution, right? Like, help me out. Yeah. So, tell us, I mean, from your perspective, we're kind of early here in 2023, right, in the first quarter. I mean, what do you see in e-commerce in particular that's happening right now that you think is very interesting?
Yeah, so I think some of the most important things that have been highlighted really by the pandemic is this need for supply chain visibility, and right. there are so many more eyeballs on the supply chain sector over the last 3 years, and I think probably in years past it was kind of maybe not a forgotten part of the company, right? But it's now so much more emphasized, and I think there's been a lot of challenges when it comes to just the macroeconomic headwinds that we've been kind of experiencing over the last 12 to 14 months. A lot of the advertising and marketing issues that there have been, but especially in the 3PL space, I often say that the 3PL and customer relationship is so fraught, and that like it's often like a no news is good news type of industry. Yeah. So I think that for a 3PL, some of the challenges there are definitely just around just transparency and visibility on the day-to-day. And then I also think expectation setting. I know that's a pretty general claim, but I think it is probably the most important aspect from a 3PL and a merchant relationship. So.
Interesting. So, I mean, and certainly I will say, as I'm recording today, right, like this is the fourth podcast I've recorded today. And I think this is the 3 out of the 4 visibility was like a part of the conversation, right? So I mean, from your perspective, I mean, obviously, we know now working in supply chain and operations, like since the pandemic now, like, we're all stars, right? Like we're the superstars, like everybody's worried about us now, right? Whereas like you said before, like, we kind of were, just the people in the corner there, and like, just talk to them when like something doesn't deliver on time, and that's it basically, right? But now like supply chain, like you said, it has so much spotlight on it, and a lot of people, like you said, are concerned about this visibility and being able to see not only from like an operations or a business perspective where things are in the supply chain, but also the consumer now is very much concerned about where is their product, right? And I know myself as well, and my son too, like he's like, oh, where's the Amazon package? Like, how many more stops, right? Because the app will tell you, like, it's 10 stops away. And so he's like, oh, can I see it on the app? Like, he's waiting for a toy or something. And so, that is kind of ingrained in our brains now, the way that we think. Like, we want to see where those packages are. So I'm curious, like, how do you see now 3PLs who maybe in the past didn't necessarily have to provide that level of visibility or transparency? Like, how do you see people and operations kind of tackling this issue and being able to provide that further visibility?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I can go in a million different ways. To your point around, customer satisfaction. I mean, it all starts with knowing inventory counts and inventory levels and being able to do proper, supply and demand planning. And I think a lot of the structural or like the foundation for inventory management is what drives kind of the potential for improved customer satisfaction. I think that because Amazon has conditioned American consumers to want their packages in 4 to 8 hours, they are expecting that out of every brand that they interact with online, not necessarily knowing what the infrastructure is to actually get it delivered to their home from the warehouse into business into business days. And so from a customer, experience perspective, it is directly correlated with the shipping, right? And oftentimes brands, when you're looking at the lifetime value of a brand, right? Like oftentimes brands typically aren't like profitable off of like just one purchase from a consumer, but it's those subsequent, orders that they will then have a higher lifetime value. And it's directly linked with the shipping, right? And so if a customer has a poor experience shipping, the likelihood that they don't return is probably higher, right? Yeah. And so it's really important for the 3PL partner to be in constant communication with their merchants so that they in turn can be in constant communication with their customers. That's from like the merchant experience standpoint, like post-purchase. And there are a bunch of tools, that tackle that, after it leaves the warehouse and how you can create a, more fluid customer experience. But I think just from an operator's perspective, or even like someone who's dealing with, the financials, like you need to, the benefits of having inventory visibility, I think, are the ability to optimize your stock levels, right? If you I wrote a post on LinkedIn the other day about this, but if you have too much inventory sitting around in a warehouse, that is basically cash that is just sitting on the side.
Right.
And for small businesses, cash flow is like probably the number one most important thing. And so it's really, really important for brands of all sizes, especially smaller ones that might be bootstrapped, to really have a better sense of, okay, here's how much inventory I have. Here's how long it's going to last. Here are the historical, velocities of each SKU. And knowing that information and knowing those inputs will allow operators to, I think, be a little bit more efficient in how they plan, for it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you brought up a lot of great points there. And I think, I'm a, inventory control guy in my career, background. And you mentioned inventory in there a couple of times. And I've seen some of your posts talking about the importance of inventory as well. So, talk to us a little bit about your perspective on that. And I'm curious too, like from your experience and your background a little bit. I mean, you're on the sales side kind of, right, at this point. And, at what point did you kind of discover and see that, this inventory management is such an important aspect of a business?
Mm-hmm. I think I realized it probably early on in my career. Before even I came to ShipBob, I worked for C.H. Robinson doing carrier sales, so I was working with some really large brands. But I often asked some of like the logistics managers how they tracked like this inventory, whether it was through an ERP system. And you'd be surprised at the percentage of people that responded by saying it's just done manually through Excel. And I think Excel will always have an important piece, and everyone's planning. I think there's an over reliance on it to say, because you have one person that creates the spreadsheet, and then it's a mix of tribal knowledge, right, for them trying to teach it out to their team and how to use it within this specific system. And so I think it's just people doing what they've always known to do, which necessarily isn't like a bad way, but it might not be the most efficient. And so oftentimes I would say, I track demand planning through Excel, and then I would dig a little bit deeper and I go, okay, well, what happens if the sheet goes down, or like what happens if there's an error in one of the calculations? They'll get a number of different reasons and explanations. And I go, well, how is your inventory tied with the levels at the 3PL side? And they go, it's really not. We kind of just take our 3PL's word for it. And I was like, oh wow, and it kind of just opened my eyes to seemingly there's a disconnect, right, between what brand say that they have versus what their 3PL provider might say that they have.
And I think it's interesting because even prior to the pandemic, we mentioned there, like the supply chain, people didn't really pay attention, right, to the supply chain, and now it's had this great visibility. But being someone that's been in inventory control and running inventory control departments within operations, and that's really like no spotlight at all unless like something's wrong. So
it's not a sexy job by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all. But being in that role and understanding the importance of inventory, and I think we can kind of relate here. It's like there's so much that's driving from those inventory counts, like you said, being correct, like not having, or like you said, like taking the 3PL's word for what they say they have on hand for you is kind of dangerous, right? Because we talk about e-commerce, and you talked about even earlier, like the customer retention and our customers like returning for repeat orders. Like if you say you have something in stock and you go to order that, and then after the fact you have to email your customer and tell them, well, actually we don't have it, right? It's out of stock. And that's not a good experience, right? I mean, so, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on like how the brand should have that relationship with their 3PL and have, I guess, kick it back to visibility, like have that visibility into like what is their actual inventory levels like in these facilities.
Yeah, definitely. I think that having accurate inventory counts can or to think about it a different way. A lack of inventory visibility can negatively impact the actual fulfillment process and your order accuracy rates, right? To use your example, if someone ordered something and the warehouse is actually out of stock, but it allowed the customer to place an order, they now go into like negative inventory, right? Or back ordered status. And then it becomes a much more reactive type of like post sale where you're then reaching out, or the brand is then reaching out to the customer saying, hey, you have to wait X amount of days for us to get back in stock for it, right? Or, do like a refund, which is never, a good thing to go about. So I think that, the chances are much higher for errors to occur when inventory is not properly managed. And I think when it comes to the 3PL, I would say if you're a brand, it all stems back to the procurement process. If you're if you're on the hunt for a new 3PL, and that's really drilling into what capabilities the 3PL is able to provide to you. Are they able to sync inventory counts? Are they able to, sync across whatever, sales channel that you're integrating with them, right? And I think it's that two-way flow of communication between the sales channel and the 3PL, which is really important. And I think that a lot of times people historically have looked at a 3PL as a commodity. And I think part of my role in the sales department is kind of challenging that notion and saying like, no, you really do need a 3PL partner that will understand your unique brand's needs and understand how they can help you to avoid, I would assume, some of the common problems, hence why they're talking with the 3PL, in the first place. So.
Step. Do you know how many steps your warehouse workers are taking a day? When your workers are walking, you're losing money. Endless trips to the printer or computer add up fast. Newcastle's mobile industrial carts with integrated power eliminate the walking to stationary printers and computers, keeping workers focused on high-value tasks, often doubling their output. Thousands of powered cart installations, including ones at the new warehouse's own micro-fulfillment center and in my previous jobs, prove that Newcastle customers get more done and save money. To learn more, head to newcastlesys.com. That's newcastlesys.com. Interesting. And I'm wondering from your perspective, I mean, we talk about e-commerce brands, and I think, one of the things is that there's so many brands that are coming out and growing, that are coming from people that are, not necessarily familiar with this world, right? So they're not really sure like what their expectation should be of a 3PL. Yeah. Like they just know like, they need somebody that can ship stuff for them, basically. So they may just go with whoever. So, from that perspective, especially at something of the level of, inventory accuracy you touched on there and having those kind of sync ups and inventory levels, from a brand's perspective, when they're like going to look for 3PLs, what should their expectation be for inventory control practices from the 3PL?
Yeah, so I think in terms of actual practices, it would be being able to have as real time as you can get live inventory syncs between, let's say, if you're a Shopify, store or WordPress that's powered by WooCommerce, right? Just having like live inventory counts pushed back. I would say doing routine. When I say routine, I mean maybe quarterly cycle counts at bare minimum. Annual cycle counts, in which you're actually doing a full physical count, a number of different implications for the accounting and finance team, right? Yeah. Whether or not they need to mark down inventory. And I would say really press your 3PL on what level of detail or, granularity they get around both order and inventory management, because both, they're tied hand in hand. But I feel like inventory is the number one thing that powers the other aspects of your brand. If you don't have a good sense of, or if you don't have accurate numbers, it makes the other areas of running the brand that much harder. So right.
The thing is, it's a really good point, because even like you said, you have inaccurate inventory at your facilities, wherever those may be, whether you have one 3PL or multiple 3PLs, and then you start to try and do like, planning activities and procurement activities, and the 3PLs telling you got 100 units there, and really it's like 50 units because they shipped a full case instead of an each or something like that, or whatever the case may be. Right. That can really throw you off in terms of your planning, especially if you have long lead times getting stuff from overseas and stuff like that. It can really throw off your entire business. So, I mean, from a brand's perspective as well, I mean, what are you seeing out there? And I'm curious too, what are you seeing that you're hearing from brands that maybe are coming your way that are having challenges with their 3PLs on inventory accuracy? I mean, what are you seeing as like, I guess maybe a market like on average, or like, low to high side of what 3PLs are really doing in terms of like inventory accuracy percentages?
Yeah, I think a lot of the 3PLs are working on more of a tech solution that has historically been more manual and allowing data to be transferred or shared more regularly. I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is with brands that are with their current 3PL, they'll get like an inventory report monthly, or they have to ask their 3PL for an inventory report. So there's not readily available information at their fingertips. I think over the last decade, there's been obviously a lot of new partners in this tech-enabled 3PL space. Our company is one of them, that we have many direct competitors, right? And I think that they're giving and shedding more light and being more open and transparent about what they can and cannot do when it comes to that. And I would say that just monitoring stock, having the tools on your end, whether it's through technology, or probably more through technology, will allow you to have a better sense of how to plan the other aspects of your business. And it's incumbent on the 3PL partner to provide these details to them, or to build systems that gives that information, and so that they're not chasing down their 3PL to get the information that they really need for a end of week report, for example. Yeah,
and I think that should be, it should just be something that's there, right? I mean, if you're looking at a 3PL, I mean, they should be able to provide that information to you, like you said, like on a weekly basis, like at least, if not, have some type of like daily visibility. Yeah, I mean, that's ideal, right? Go in anytime and it's live, right? But as we look at this stuff, and I think it's really important that these 3PLs are doing these things as well, and helping to support the brands, because I think, like you said earlier, you really want a partner versus just having like you said, a 3PL is a commodity, right? So it's really, really important to be able to do that, and I think increasing these visibilities and stuff like you're talking about can certainly help you to do that, and give you some insight too, so you can do what you need to do as a business and take some action based on that, right? Yeah. So we kind of talked. I think we could probably talk for a very long time about inventory. I think
yes,
we're both very passionate about this, right? But I do want to hear your thoughts too as well. We talked a little bit about how visibility is coming into play. As becoming more and more important for people, whether it's big operations, small operations, just kind of understanding what's happening in the supply chain. But I'm curious from your perspective, as we're here in 2023, and we certainly kind of, I think, crossed that bridge of coming out of the pandemic, right? And things are, I would say, pretty much back to normal, maybe like 98% or something like that. But, what are some challenges like now that brands are facing, looking at like this year, and, like looking at last year's kind of like peak seasons, and trying to figure out for this year, and what's really kind of the challenges that they're facing?
I think that over the last decade or so, from like 2010 to 2020, you saw a lot of digitally native brands really crop up and make a name for themselves, and going through their direct consumer channels only. And a lot of 3PLs were outfitted to do just that, or to do D2C, e-com fulfillment. And I think over the last 5 or so years, these D2C brands have realized that they too need to grow revenues through other sales channels. And that's getting into wholesale, that's getting into traditional brick and mortar retail. And I think it's finding a 3PL that has core competencies in both. You'll often hear people say, oh, we have a 3PL partner. They're really good at B2B distribution, pallet in, pallet out, full cases, but they stink at, direct to consumer fulfillment, and vice versa. You hear that. And so I think we're kind of at a unique inflection point for 3PLs in general, where they need to really listen to the brands and understand the challenges that their brands are facing. And so that the 3PLs can also adapt in their core competencies, as well. And I think that's as they get into brick and mortar and get into retail, which are vastly different, pick, pack and, requirements, retailer compliance comes into this a lot. And so there's a number of different things that I would say that's a big challenge that I've seen for most brands. And then, also for brands trying to determine, what do we care about more? Do we care more about getting the orders to the customer in 2 days? Does our customer base actually care about getting their order in 2 days? Are we able to ship a more, economy type service that might get there in, 4 to 5 business days? And how does that impact our long-term vision for the brand? So there's a number of different things that brands are, I think, thinking about and going back and forth on. And they should be. And for the brands that are listening out there, make sure that you are having minimum weekly conversations with your 3PL partner, because things change constantly. And I'm still talking with the brands, that some of the brands that we work with, and still trying to strategize around, hey, here's where we hit the mark, here's where we may miss or may have missed the mark, and here's how we can be, continuously improving.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you said that these brands that are digitally native, like you said, are now trying to figure out how to get into different channels as well, because it's kind of the opposite of what we saw during the pandemic, right? Where businesses that were, pretty much strictly like B2B, like just only selling through retailers and things like that, were then trying to, pivot and figure out how they do B2C, right? So I think that's pretty interesting, because I've certainly seen some brands that I've known that were, mostly just online, pop up with some stores here and there, and saw the store and I'm like, oh, they have like a store now. That's pretty interesting, right? So it's kind of like the flip side of that. So I think that's really interesting. And then your other thought there around trying to determine, like, I'm curious, like, what do you think, or what are you seeing from brands around those shipping windows? Because there's a lot of, talk about, it's been for a while, talk about, how do we, ship faster? How do we, get people things? And people are working on solutions to try and do, same day delivery, 2-hour delivery, 10-minute delivery, crazy stuff like that. I mean, do you see brands that you talk to or are paying attention to? What do you think the service level is now that's like the one that majority of brands are trying to achieve? I don't think majority of brands are trying to get necessarily same day, but where do you think that level is kind of at right now?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, I can tell you that I think myself as a consumer, and as someone who works directly with brands, I can tell you that brands care a hell of a lot more about the actual date and the accuracy around the date that it's going to deliver, less so about the actual speed. Okay. I would say that people want to be in the know about, okay, I go to the checkout page, it's going to arrive at my doorstep on X day. That's what they want to know. They don't really they care less about how you get to that date, right?
Yeah.
They don't really care. They just want to know, okay, I need it for this date. I'm going to purchase with this shipping speed. And so my personal opinion is that if people wanted something really, really quick, they would go to Amazon anyway. But if they're on the website, most websites nowadays should be offering, or most brands on their checkout page should be offering at least, for lack of a better term, slow, medium, and fast shipping options, and allowing, giving that choice to the consumer, allowing them to pick. But no 3PL has a silver bullet for the most part. They all use the same carriers, and so, it's about positioning your inventory strategically in, areas that are closer to their customer base, so that you can obviously minimize transit times as much as possible. But I've seen a little bit of a shift over the last, I would say, 12 to 24 months about, is the order accurately packed, and is it actually going to get to my doorstep on the day that it said that it was going to? I don't really care if you used a DHL label or a UPS ground label. I don't care, as long as it gets to me on that specific day. So I'm seeing a little bit more of that in the field.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I'm the same way as a consumer as well. As like, if you said you're going to get it to me by this date, like that's when I expect it to be there. And, in some cases, like I need something, pretty fast because it's like a situation or whatever. And, but I have seen like where, as I'm ordering something based on like a need, and it's like, oh, I need it by Friday. It says it'll deliver by Thursday. Like, okay, I'm going to go with this option. Right. So I think like you're saying, I mean, I do see that where, personally, like that matters more to me necessarily than the speed. Like, as long as I'm going to have it by the time that I need it, with like, a little cushion just in case, I think that's a good thing. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of grows. And I think even more, like I mentioned earlier, like in our conversation, like about, Amazon tells you like, it's 10 stops away or something like that. I'm interested to see, like, as we get more sophisticated on visibility, like, will there be somebody that comes out, and it'd probably be Amazon maybe first, right? But I mean, I'm interested to see, like, okay, like, because I'm starting to see some things too where, like I got something recently, it was coming through UPS, and they actually gave me like a delivery window, like a time frame. And I can't say that I had seen that before. So I'm interested to see, like, and then there was actually an option too, like to go in and you could change the delivery window if you wanted to. So I'm kind of interested to see, like, as shippers, as we get like this more increased visibility, like, can you tell me like, okay, like this package is gonna arrive between 5 and 6 o'clock, or even like one day it's like, oh, it's gonna get there like 5:42 p.m. or something like that, right?
Amazon's done a great job of that. I mean, over the last 2 years, you can choose like overnight delivery now. You can pick your own specific window. I think I've seen that. I mean, I think that's just probably part and parcel because they're a $1 trillion company, right? And not every brand will be able to have that. Have that much money and people to make that happen. But I mean, it's just really unique in terms of like the estimated like delivery time, and like the post-purchase like experience is so, going back to it, I know there's like the two main players that I often see when I purchase are like Narvar and like Aftership. And I would probably say that those two brands are probably, or companies are probably, working on that specific, use case that you were mentioning. Oh, how many stops away is the delivery driver, right? Because it's like our attention spans are like, we need it right now. We need it in this moment. We're checking our phones all the time, and it's like, someone's going to have to do it. But these like the on-demand delivery grocery stuff is. You made a comment about that. Can I get it in like 10 minutes or 15 minutes? Or whatever? I think from what I've read and what I've actually experienced, that seems like an unsustainable, like just business in general. My sister lives in Manhattan. Okay. She told me she used to use this company called Joker all the time. Yeah. And she would order just like tissues and like, pencils and like certain things like that. And it would get to her house in 15 minutes, and she paid nothing for delivery. Wow. And from first glance, I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like it's, and these companies raised a lot of money. And I think that's probably more of the environment that was here during COVID. Every VC and their mother seemed to like pour money into, logistics, darlings. So, but now you're seeing that those are like unsustainable business models and that you actually can't get something delivered in 15 minutes consistently without losing a hell of a lot of money on that, specific order. So I think like those on-demand deliveries are certainly dead, but for the many 3PLs that are out there, I think it's continue to broaden and diversify your carrier base and potentially warehouse locations as well to minimize transit times. So
yeah, definitely. And I've read some stories too about some of those like really quick delivery things, and just kind of like the madness that goes on in order to like make those orders happen. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But I
don't know how they do it.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty wild. But so I mean, it's really interesting to talk to you, Aaron, and definitely happy to get your insights here on kind of the e-commerce and the supply chain space overall. So very interesting stuff, and definitely looking forward to seeing what some of the things you talked about start to unravel here and kind of like come to fruition, and be interested to check in with you later on and see how things are progressing, and some other predictions you might have, maybe going into next year or something like that. So thank you for coming on the show. If people are interested in getting in touch with you or finding out more about you, how could they do that?
Yeah, feel free to go to my LinkedIn page, drop me a note there. That'll probably be the most efficient way. I think I have my personal email tagged on there too. So Feel free if you're ever, wanting just to talk shop or, learn a little bit more. I'm always a listening ear and always, willing to share my perspective on things. And if you're in the market for a new 3PL, obviously I can I can help you out there. And I would also say as my parting words that switching 3PLs is a very daunting task, both from an operation and financial perspective. And so if your first instinct is to leave, make sure that you are truly going through every situation with your current provider, try to work it out with them prior to going on a whole new search for a 3PL provider. It is one of the most important decisions that your company can make, and make sure that you are doing your due diligence. And so that would be my final words.
All right, great. And definitely good final words there as well. And I think, I echo that in the sense that you want to make sure you're partnering with the right person, right, or the right company. So very good information there. And we'll definitely link to your LinkedIn at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So Aaron, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.